time once again to go racing.
It does not get any better than this.
The pressure is really on now.
Yes, it's pole position. Lights out and we're racing in PSGL.
The first lap has been absolute chaos.
What an overtake.
Oh no!
I've never seen anything like it.
Side by side again. This will be settled right at the end. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back here to PSGL on the PlayStation platform once again. And we are back with round number 11 of the championship here at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. It is the Mexican Grand Prix. My name is Luke Etheridge, and joining me as always on a Monday night in the commentary box is Aidan Carter. Aidan, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Been a long old day for me down in the New Forest, so nice to recover and sit down and relax and hopefully enjoy a nice day of racing today. And yeah, Mexico, what a great track, and great track for league racing, and I'm sure it's going to add another level of spice to this championship that's really heated up in recent rounds. So yeah, really looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, it has done. I mean, not so long ago, obviously we had the Matthew Alder. Looked like he was running away from things. Isma closed up, but we had quite an interesting result last time around. We had a brand new winner, and not only that, I believe it was his first win ever in PSGL across all the tiers, and his first podium in the top tier. It was Xander van Dijken who took a fantastic victory in the Mercedes. A bit unlucky not to take a podium, at least a couple of races ago at Zandvoort. Definitely made up for it last time around. It was a second place for Daneco, continuing a good run of form we've seen from him. And Matthew Alder somewhere near back to his best with a third place. It is still Isma, though, that leads the championship. As you can see on your screen at the moment, he currently is sat there on 95 points, 91 for Matthew Alder. Daneco, a further 11 behind. Any one of those could be leading at the end of tonight. Max Wiesel still just about in this championship fight, and Fusilio currently leading the best of the rest. And Matthew definitely looks as though he's somewhere near back to his best.
Yeah, definitely looks like it, doesn't he? He had such a horrid run of 2 rounds before Brazil, but yeah, Brazil definitely back to his stronger ways that we're used to seeing from him. But has he paid the price for those 2 rounds of shortfalls, really? Has he paid the price? Has he fallen at one of the hurdles that he really needed to shine at? Because Isma capitalised beautifully on both of those mistakes. So I guess Matthew Alder's going to have to really stick it to Isma for the rest of this championship, or hope Isma has a similar run of bad form to get back into the lead. And of course, they can't forget Daneco. Daneco's continuing on his strong run so far in the latter stages of this season, and he's less than a race win off the championship lead as well. So Isma and Matthew Alder can't be too focused on one another, because if they do get too focused on one another, Daneco's there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, the old danger from the Kimi Räikkönen strategy in 2007 when Hamilton and Alonso famously were too focused on each other, and Kimi went and snuck for championship at the end. It's not just close in the drivers as well. The constructors, as you can see, looking incredibly tight at the moment. We get that for you on the screen. Williams on 120 points. Aston Martin getting themselves up to 107. Some good form from Daneco, and Cornet picking up consistent points as well. H-Eagle started picking up the odd points finish. Points in each of the last 2 races. I mean, Red Bull are in third on 98. Ferrari there still in the battle on 90. And you can see the rest of the standings there. So constructors looking extremely close, drivers looking really close, and hopefully we'll get some really close racing tonight at Mexico.
Yeah, really hope so. A couple of the drivers mentioned it in the post-race interviews that we had last week, but they're expecting this race to possibly be a bit of a DRS train. But we know this track to be really, really difficult for penalties. Tyre wear and overheating is a big factor here. We know that strategy plays a massive part. So while it may be fairly easy to follow in the DRS range, I think that the fact that we're going to have so many different strategies tonight may add a new element that we haven't seen for a while in this championship, which I think will be really, really good to see. And this is a track where you can do a 1-stop or you can do a 2-stop. Either way is really just as fast as the other. It just kind of depends on what you prefer, and what suits you best. And I think the fact that we're a little bit down on numbers tonight, the fact that we've got 16 drivers tonight, could maybe swing it towards a 2-stop, I would say. There's going to be less traffic, so I think we may see a few more drivers be a bit more aggressive.
Yeah, they might do indeed. I know this was one of the circuits, a bit like Canada. On previous games, it was a nailed-on 2-stop strategy, but on this one, we do see things that are slightly different. We've seen how close things are across both championships. Do you reckon we could be at the point where maybe, you know, a bit of team orders, a bit of team tactics could come into things?
I definitely think so. With how close it is, you've got to be thinking about that at this point in the championship, haven't you? The second driver has got to be thinking about the team side of things as well, while helping out their teammate in the drivers' championship. They've got to, of course, make sure that they're getting the best race they possibly can. I mean, must have been 4 or 5 rounds ago, we were talking about how none of the manufacturers at the top of the sheets were having good runs with both cars. It was always a really dominant lead car and the second car not quite performing at the same level. When while that has slightly improved in recent rounds, it's still kind of the same, really, isn't it? The likes of Philip Wouters and H. Eagle haven't kind of gotten off the ground in recent rounds. They've had quite a bit of bad luck come their way. Cornet's gotten on the up a little bit more, which is why we're seeing Aston involved in the manufacturers a lot more than we were seeing at the start of the championship, but it's still not enough at the moment, really, for any one team to run away with it. So, manufacturers-wise, they really need need to see drivers like Wouters, Cornet, and H Eagle really step up their game and fight for podiums.
Yeah, it is. And of course, by doing that, they'll possibly be taking points off the rivals of their main drivers in those teams. So, something we could see. Farby is returning tonight after a long vacation, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. His teammate did get pole position at the last race at Brazil, his 3rd pole of the season, but Max Wiesel's still yet to claim a victory. Pole position was post-patch last season. It was a 1:13.547 in the top tier. We saw a 1:13.5 as well today in F2, so looks like any time in the low 1:13s is definitely going to be a good one. Very overcast conditions for qualifying, and it looks like we are going to get some rain in the race, so that's going to obviously ruin those DRS trains and pretty much make us on a very nailed-on one-stop strategy. But with the power of the slipstream, I think we'd still see some overtaking. I know sometimes at races it becomes a lot more difficult in the way. I'd still expect to see quite a bit of overtaking around here, even if we do get some rain. Let's follow Isma then on a lap around the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, first used in 1963 on the track, barring the final sector. Hasn't really changed much since then. It's already had this extremely long slipstream, this extremely long run down towards turn number 1. You can see there 201 miles per hour, just over 320 as he brakes for the chicane at turns number 1 and 2. 3 following shortly afterwards, taking quite a lot of curb there. The game obviously allowing you to do that as you now head down the second DRS zone into 4 and 5. Really a good possibility to get an overtake done into this if you don't manage it on the first straight, as it does share that detection point, and quite often you see the drivers battling around this double apex right-hander at turn 6 as well. And this is where you really need confidence in your car. This is where you see a lot of the invalidations around this circuit as you fling your way through the S section. 7, 8, 9 and 10, just feathering the throttle there. Our championship leader trying to keep everything nice and tidy. I think perhaps just maybe leaving a little bit in hand with the track limits. Looking good, 55 seconds coming through the first sector. Now into the 407, this twisty baseball stadium section that was added for the 2015 race when Formula 1 returned into Mexico. Through turn number 16, you hug the right-hand side of the circuit through 17. 1:13.733. Very good banker lap there from Isma.
Yeah, pretty solid banker lap, and he was the only person, at least so far, that we're seeing in the 27s in the first sector, so no one really at the moment quite able to match. Hasselcombe crosses the line 2.5 tenths of a second behind it in the AlphaTauri, just waiting to see who else is on the lap. Santeri was not on a push lap. He's going again on the same set of tyres, but of course, with there being predicted rain in the race, that's not really going to matter too much. Max Wiesel on a lap. He's picked up a few pole positions already this season. Denerco goes into P2 then in the Aston, just behind his championship rival. Max Wiesel hopping over those sausage curbs in that stadium section as he heads around the Peraltada, the final corner, and up towards the line. Where can he put the Ferrari? Only P5 for the time being, a 14 flat, 3 tenths of a second off the fastest time at the moment. Valentin, who of course impressed last time out, back up there at the front again, once again in that McLaren in second position, but at the moment still no one close to Isma, and he's found pretty much all of that time in the first sector of the lap.
Yeah, Isma fastest in the first sector at the moment. Fastest in the second sector was Max Wiesel, and Denerco fastest in the middle one. Looking like a pretty good lap though at the moment from Santeri. He was only a few hundredths off coming through sector 1 on Isbert, and he's actually faster as he comes through the middle sector as well. This is looking like a decent lap from Santeri, who's been a revelation since he joined PSGL F1. He's taken part in 4 races. He's already up to 6th in the championship. Bit of a twitch there on the car coming through 14 and 15. That short, sharp snap, change of direction across the curb and across the line for Santeri. A 1:13.647 from the newly signed Visceral Racing driver. He'll be very impressed with that lap. He is the sole Alfa Romeo driver tonight, so having to do it all on his own for the team. We'll see whether that does affect him at all. Matthew Alder heading through the middle sector at the moment. Looks like he's backed off. Looks like common theme now. Drivers going for a second warm-up lap, which you can do around Mexico. It's one of the shortest tracks on the calendar.
Yeah, it looks deceiving, really, isn't it? With how long that pit straight is, you'd expect it to be actually quite a long circuit, but it's anything but, isn't it? It's really, really short, and like you say, you can get 2 warm-up laps. I think there may be slightly cooler conditions with the overcast conditions as well will help that, and of course the fact that they don't have to start on these tyres will obviously help that as well. So a lot of it will be about prepping as much as they can, burning as much fuel as they possibly can on these tyres as well before going for their fastest run. Another driver that was on a run was Nikita, but he completely outbroke himself at turn number 1 and missed the corner. So that is another lap for the Mercedes driver that is not going to be very competitive. Fusillo on a lap in the other Mercedes, but his first sector is not competitive at the moment. He's best part of 0.6 of a second off the fastest first sector, and he's just backed off in the middle part of the lap. So both Mercedes not having great first runs so far. We'll see what Matthew Alder can do now, but through the first sector time, he's a 28 flat. Not bad, but still over a 10th off the fastest we've seen so far.
Yeah, whether that's a setup choice, of course, because with us seeing light rain in the race, you might just be tempted to throw a bit more downforce on the car. However, that might leave you a sitting duck in the straight line, even in the intermediate conditions. This, though, is where you'll gain time. Just having to snatch at the wheel slightly, coming through turns number 7 and 8, is always going to just scrub off that tiniest bit of speed. And you can see there, it is a very good middle sector, actually.
Wow.
This shows what I know, fastest of everyone. I think he is marginally off what we've seen from Santeri at the moment. But Matthew Alder, normally if he gets things right in qualifying at the start, is a sign of a good weekend. On a few occasions he's left it late in qualifying, and even when he's set a good lap, hasn't been right at his best. Looks like he's definitely at his best though at the moment. 1:13.580 then from Matthew Alder. Faster than what we saw in qualifying in F2. And the many people's pre-season favourite looking very handy indeed. Santeri in second, Isma up in third, and Daneco in fifth. The main championship rivals all doing extremely well with 10 minutes 46 seconds remaining.
Yeah, all right up the front as you would expect, along with Santeri and Valentin, who've been the 2 stars of the recent rounds, haven't they? Like you said, Santeri's been a revelation since joining. Valentin's only been in for 2 rounds, but in both rounds has played a massive part in the race, and again is right up there. So 2 real stars of the future of PSGL F1, it seems, in Santeri and Valentin. But yeah, not a surprise to see those top drivers right up there, as Isma's going again for another run now in the Williams. So we'll see what he can do on the second run. Of course, though, we spoke about this a little bit last week as well. The run towards turn 1 is so long that actually being on pole or on the front row might not be that good of a position to be in. The intermediate conditions may nullify that just a little bit, with the toe not being as strong in the wet. But either way, if Matthew Alder does set a really good qualifying time and is on pole, he still could be under massive threat into turn 1 from the people on the second row of the grid.
Yeah, it could be indeed. Isma is getting it slightly wrong through the first couple of corners, so he's backing off. We're not going to see any improvements from him. You're absolutely right. It is a very, very interesting circuit. We see this about Spa with the run down towards Lacombe that you don't really want to be starting in first place. It's the same here. It is that run towards the first corner. We saw it with Verstappen versus the 2 Mercedes drivers last year, that door being left open on the outside, and he was able to sweep all the way around the outside. On board with Lacombe then, and I feel like I've said this for the last few weeks, has shown promise in qualifying, has shown promise in parts of the races, but still only has that 1 sole point score, and that was looking like a very handy lap indeed until he went deep into turn number 12. Again, another corner where you will see quite a few validations, I think, over the course of this qualifying session and over the 36-minute race as well. We'll see what corner he can do. He's just started his lap at the moment. Another driver that seems to have really got some confidence, and even though they are second in the championship at the moment, I'd argue with the form Daneco's been in and with the form Cornet's been in, probably the Aston Martin team favourite for the constructors.
You've got to say, based on recent form, that definitely looks the case, doesn't it? Cornet really has stepped up his game in recent rounds. He had such a horror show of the start to the season. He had great pace, but just couldn't seem to find a clean bit of racetrack to put the pace down, and was involved in a lot of incidents early on in the season, but has improved a lot as of recently, of course. So See if he can continue that run into this round, and that'll be massive for Aston Martin if they can get right up there in the manufacturers. It's looking like a very committed middle sector from Cornet, as Valentin now goes fastest on a 13.4. Lovely lap for the McLaren man. Cornet at the moment is about 4 to 5 tenths of a second off the fastest time we've seen so far. Max Wiesel's crossed the line and gone P4. Isma's gone a game on the same set of tyres, but it's gone slower in the first sector. So Isma, on his second run at least, not looking as strong, not found any time as of yet, but we know that the middle sector is where a lot of these drivers are finding the time, and Valentin's middle sector especially is very, very impressive.
Yeah, incredible middle sector there from Valentin. Final sector as well was fastest of everyone. Became known as a bit of a Mr. Saturday in F2 last season. Seems to have improved his race pace this year, and we've already seen him get a decent haul of points with a fifth a couple of races ago on his first race in the top tier. On board with Danerco then, 4 podiums out of the last 5 races, and that is a very handy middle sector indeed. He's going to be there or thereabouts with Matthew Alder, perhaps just a bit deep though into turn number 11. That's one that could punish him on the rest of this lap. It is worth carrying on towards the end though. 4 tenths off a pole position at the moment on the 4th row of the grid. What can Danerco do as he heads towards the line? In the end, loses a bit of that time improvement, only up into 5th place. Incredibly close again though. He's half a tenth off of 3rd as things stand, so do not be surprised even with that final sector, which I don't think was actually a personal best. No, it wasn't. Don't be surprised if we do see him getting further up the order. Santeri wasn't really able to improve on that lap. We saw Isma dive his way into the pit, so a lot of drivers still finding it tricky on this circuit, as Yakita, he's on his way back, and it looks like he's backed off on this one last at the moment. Good to see him back. He has missed a few races for various reasons. Same with Fabi as well, being on holiday. Great to see him back. Of course, with it raining in the race, we're not going to see any alternate strategies. Qualifying is oh so important. We saw that in Portugal in these wet conditions, so there's no point leaving anything on the table. You might as well just go for it in this qualifying session, because we know what the strategy is going to be. It will be a one-stop, and we know it's going to be pretty difficult to overtake.
Yeah, going to be difficult, like you say, so these drivers are going to have to rely on pure pace in the wet conditions, which is maybe why we're seeing a few of these drivers try something a little bit different setup-wise. I think it is pretty plain to see that Isma's gone for something maybe a little bit faster in a straight line to maybe help him in that sense, but it's punishing him at the moment in qualifying in the middle sector. He's just not as fast as everybody else around him at the moment in the middle part of the lap. In fact, pretty much everyone in front of him is in the 26s in the middle sector. He's still in the 27s and is in fact slower than a lot of the drivers behind him on the grid in the middle sector. So that's the punishment he takes for qualifying, but it could benefit nicely in the race. If he's got a fast car in a straight line with how long the straights are, you need any sort of advantage you can get in a straight line in the wet conditions. So it's difficult to say what the best strategy in terms of setup is for this track in these conditions, because it's so difficult to overtake in the wet. Do you go for the qualifying and hope and pray that you can hold on at the front, or do you do what Isma is doing and go for something that makes your race maybe a little bit easier, but puts you on the back foot straight away?
Yes, and let's not forget, we only know that it is going to be light rain. That's all the drivers know as well. I've done a race in full light rain where you've only needed for slick tyres. We could be talking absolute rubbish at the moment. DRS might never get disabled. It just might be incredibly greasy out there. Matthew Alder was 3 thousandths down on his personal best and invalidated on that lap, so he is going to go for the second one. Not got a lot, though, of ERS, so I would be surprised if he finds any improvement over the whole of this lap. Improves in the first sector, though. 22 thousandths up at the moment for Matthew Alder. That yellow flag ahead of him is just Yakita, who's backing off after setting a very good lap to put him up into 7th place. But let's follow the man second in the championship at the moment, the man who won here last season to keep his championship hopes alive when it was him versus Joost and Duncan. Joost ended up finishing 3rd in that race, with Will G taking a 2nd place, and Matthew Alder again just losing a bit of time in the middle sector, and that red DRS light starting to blink on the car. So this is going to affect him out of these acceleration zones where you really do see the main effectiveness of the hybrid system of these Formula 1 cars at the low speed. Not too surprising then to see Matthew diving into the pits. 2nd in the championship, 2nd in qualifying at the moment. It is Valentin fastest from Matthew Alder. Santeri in 3rd, Max Wiesel in 4th, Danerco and Isma on the 3rd row of the grid, and Isma heading out early. He wants to get at least a couple of runs at this. Currently needs to find just over a quarter of a second to get himself up towards the front.
Yeah, smart move from Isma, I think, to go out a little bit earlier, like you say, just to get those runs in and be able to do something a little bit different, so that if he does invalidate the first one, he can come back and go again for another run on the same set of tyres. And we know how easy it is to invalidate around this track. We've seen it a lot already this evening. So smart for Misma to at least give himself the opportunity, but it does mean he's not going to get the best of the track conditions. And there you go. Immediately at turn number 2, didn't take enough curb and has backed off the lap straight away. But because he's gone out early, he has the time in the session to do it. His only problem is that now he's coming out with all of the traffic, so he's just got to make sure he doesn't back off too much and end up stuck in the train of cars all starting their laps.
Yeah, being quite a short circuit distance-wise means there's always going to be space. The space is always going to be at a premium, and of course, 16 drivers means that's not as much of a problem as it would have been if we'd have had a full grid. But second run in a row, we've seen Isma just get things a bit hot through turn number 1 and 2. Looks like to me he is struggling a bit at that part of the circuit. Looks like he's got a very fast car in a straight line. So whether he's going for a bit more of that pacey overtaking and just hoping he can hold it on through the corners, we'll wait and see whether that is going to be an interesting tactic. Let us know in the chat who you think is going to get pole position. And as you've already seen, if you watch the intro video, this stream is sponsored by Grid Rival, and you can take all your predictions there as well ahead of the sprint race that we're going to see in Formula 1 for the first time this season, where the weather conditions could well be very similar to the weather conditions we are going to see in this race if the forecasts are to be believed. Jensen then just picked up a couple of points last time around, had a good start to the season, but things have just tailed off in that midfield battle for Jensen in the Alpine, currently now in 7th in the championship on 28 points. However, he's only got 3 points in the last 3 races, so he'll be hoping to do something special this time around. Invalidates at the first chicane and backs off of the lap. This is proving to be quite a tricky circuit for a lot of the drivers.
Yeah, finding it, a lot of drivers finding it very difficult to be really committed. I think a lot of the sausage curbs, you can run over them, especially in the first part of the lap, but it is so easy to get it just slightly wrong and just get bounced offline. Isma going again on his next lap, but again down in the first sector. So maybe he's changed something on his setup just a little bit to make his car a bit better in the middle part of the lap, because he's not been anywhere near his best first sector time ever since he said it. So we'll see him through the middle part of the lap now. And it's a slight improvement, but still for Isma, this isn't looking like enough. He's not in the 54s in the middle part of the lap as everybody else around him has been. So for Isma, I don't think this is going to be enough to challenge pole unless it is an absolutely mega final sector. It's nice and committed. It's a very neat final sector as he crosses the line. Goes P4 only though, 1,000th of a second behind Santeri, but of course everyone around him is still going on their next run. So I fear for Isma that I don't think he'll be starting on the second row here.
No, it doesn't look like it at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up dropping down. I think Farby's finding some improvements. He's actually backed off of this lap, and we're already getting a bit of a traffic jam in the intro part to the final sector. As Shazoo Brock, a driver who equalled his best finish a couple of races ago with a 5th at the Netherlands. Him and his teammate Ardapel Gamer very unlucky at Brazil, getting involved in separate incidents to end up bringing home no points for the Haas team. What can Brock do? Bit of a wobble coming through the final corner. Does go up into 7th place, though. It is incredibly close at the moment, so don't be surprised if we see drivers getting knocked down at the death in this qualifying session. Cornet's finding a bit of time at the moment. Only gets himself up into 13th. Not the big improvement that he would have been wanting. We're seeing a good time, though, from this man coming through the final corner. Valentin is flying. Just loses out in the final sector. Matthew Older, he's up on his time. Checkered flag is out in this session. It's now or never.
Yeah, now or never, and Matthew Older, a brilliant middle sector there for the Red Bull man. He's nearly a 10th and a bit up on his personal best. Can he hold it through the final part of the lap? Valentin couldn't hold it in the final sector. He lost all the time that he would have gained. It could have been a 0.3 for Valentin. Has he lost pole with that poor final sector? As here comes Matthew Older to the line. He has. Valentin's lost pole to Matthew Older, but can anyone get near Matthew Older at the moment? Santeri's just invalidated, so Santeri won't be going any higher than 3rd. I think it seems to be all up to Denerco.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what Denerco can do. He's not improved in the first sector. We're waiting for his second sector time to come up. He is up in that, but still looks down on his personal best across the whole lap. Asacomb's improving as he heads towards the line, shoots himself up into 3rd place. Great lap there by Asacombe, and Denerco is a 10th of a second down. It is a really short final sector. He's going to struggle to improve on 7th place, heads towards the line. It's a mighty final sector. Sends himself up to 3rd on the grid. We'll see if anyone else is setting the timing screens alight at the moment. Casper I think just having a bit of a moment there. Let's just have it's Fusilio facing the wrong way, coming through the final corner. That just distracted H-Eagle, who loses out in the final sector to stay into 12th place. Obviously, we won't be seeing any improvement from Fusilio. And it is Matthew Alder who's in the barriers here, but he won't care too much. Pole position for Matthew for the first time since round number 3 of the season.
Can't believe it's been that long since we've seen Matthew Alder on pole position, but that just goes to show that his strong suit tends to be in the race. So the fact that he's on pole is a bit of a warning sign, really, isn't it, for the rest of the field there? Matthew Alder on pole. Valentin again, though, even with that mistake on that final run in the final sector, still second on the grid, and the top 2 tenths clear of the rest of the field. They were very, very strong in qualifying. Nobody able to get close to Matthew Alder and Valentin that time around.
No, they weren't. Great final sector then from Donerko, just around that time. Must have made a mistake on his earlier run, but as Aidan said, it is quite a gap between the top 2 and the rest of the field. Matthew Alder on pole position, the fastest time we've seen on the PS side in PSGL F1 then, with a 1:13.4. Valentin goes second, and all Italian second row of the grid with Donerko and Asacombe. Santeri is in 5th, Isma in 6th. If things stay as they are in the race as they were in qualifying, Matthew Alder will be back in the championship lead. Wiesel, Wouters, Brock and Yakita round out the top 10. Jensen will be starting 11th, and depending on the weather, may get a free choice of tyres, as will H-Eagle, Casper, Cornet, Forby and Fusilio. The entire grid separated by 7/10 of a second.
Really, really close, wasn't it? And I think the driver probably kicking himself the most there is Isma. If Isma had found 0.003 of a second, he would have jumped from 6th to 3rd. It was so close in the second and third rows of the grid. I've never seen it that close before. 1,000th covering 3rd through 5th, and then you've got Isma a further 1,000th of a second back, and then Max Wiesel only a further 5,000ths back from that. So really, really close, and mighty final sector, like you say, from Donerko, and really crucial in the end. Only found 400ths on his personal best, but it was enough to jump him from 8th all the way up into 3rd position. So just goes to show in PSGL F1, you've got to find the time everywhere, really at every corner. You can't spare 100th of a second, because it can cost you multiple places on the grid.
Especially around a track as short as this, 73-second laps, one tiny lockup, or perhaps the opposite, braking 5 metres earlier than you could get away with, could make all the difference. It is raining out there, we can confirm that. That might be good news for Isma, because he's put in some pretty good performances so far this season in the wet. One in Portugal, one in Hungary where we saw wet conditions towards the end of the race, got some good points in France, and one in Netherlands when it rained at the start.
Yeah, it seems to be probably one of the favourites for the wet conditions, doesn't he? He's always been strong in the wet, but he has kind of put himself on the back foot with his starting position this time around. I think in all of the other cases, he started at least on the second row of the grid in those other wet weather-affected races. So, yeah, going to be difficult for him to work his way forwards from where he is at the moment. A lot of it's going to depend on the start and the run down towards turn 1, which we've mentioned a couple of times is incredibly long. So if you can get a good launch and get into turn 1 with a head of steam, you can gain quite a few places. Another driver as well who's strong in the wet, of course, is Max Wiesel, who finished second in the first race of the season, of course, in Portimao in the wet conditions. Had a really, really strong race then. He's been strong in the wet all season long. So the drivers 6th and 7th at the moment got their work cut out, and they've got to move forwards. Yeah,
they have got to move forward. Be interesting to see what they can do in the conditions around the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez then. 4.304 kilometres, 2.674 miles, 17 turns, 3 DRS zones that aren't going to get used from other drivers that were expecting a DRS train, but still expect plenty of overtaking action on the run down towards turn number 1. And as you can see, unsurprisingly, every car on the intermediate tyres, barring any safety cars, you would expect this to be a one-stop race.
Yeah, you would expect it to do so. I mean, some tracks, you can get the intermediates a full race distance without making a pit stop, but unfortunately Mexico just isn't one of those tracks. That the track is too heavy on tyres, and you can overheat the tyres very easily here, so we're unlikely to see a driver do a no stop around this track. It's going to be about timing the intermediate stop, because the undercut here in the dry, and even in the wet possibly, could be very powerful. So if anybody wants to risk and come in for an early pit stop and try and take the distance to the end from maybe somewhere like lap 12 or 13, that could be the winning strategy, just depending on whether you can hold on to the inters towards the end.
Yeah, definitely going to be an interesting one in this race. Matthew Alder on pole position. He knows a win could very well give him that lead in the championship. Donerko in 3rd. I've got Valentin in between them. Will we see him drop back as he has done on many occasions Or could this be a chance for Valentin to really set his stamp on the top tier? Asacombe is up there as well. Isma and Max Vissel with their work cut out in 6th and 7th. The final cars going into place in the background. Fabi and Fusilio, we've seen them get multiple podiums this season. Can they work their way up the grid as we wait for the lights to come on here at Mexico City to get this race underway then? 3 lights, 4 lights, we've got 5 lights. Quite a long hold, but we're underway here at Mexico City. What are the starts like? And it seems like initially, Valentin got a bit of a better getaway, but getting some wheel spin on the second phase of the start. And straight away, you can see Matthew Alder trying to just weave and break the slipstream as they make their way down towards turn 1. It's going to be the Red Bull on the lead on the inside line, but Valentin's going to try and hold it all the way on the outside. Just outbreaks himself. Asacombe and Dederko getting very close. Santeri getting a decent start as well, but everyone looks to have got through the first couple of corners cleanly. And it is Matthew Alder just holding on to the lead then. Valentin in second place. Dederko and Asacombe getting very close together as Isma and Max Vissel are there as well. And Isma's given Asacombe a bit of a tap in the back, and that's allowed Max Vissel to try and go all the way around the outside. Got yellow flags in the background. Not sure who that is for, whether someone just went off track slightly, but I think everyone has recovered. And look at this from Max Vissel trying to get alongside Asacombe on the run down towards turn 7. He's ahead at the apex and he will take that position, although Asacombe, I don't think will be too happy about ending up off the track slightly. A brilliant start then from the Ferrari, gaining 3 places, but it is Matthew Alder held his nerve into turn number 1 and he's already built a 1-second lead.
Yeah, held his nerve, like you say. Valentin tried around the outside, but just too late on the brakes, couldn't get the car stopped, and that kind of put paid to his challenge. And already look at Matthew Alder just stretching his legs further up as further down. Isma now goes for the move on Asacombe as well into the hairpin in the middle of the stadium section, but Asacombe will have the inside line for the Perotada corner around the final part of the lap. Can Isma get the better run on the outside? He runs a little bit off track, and that's going to allow Santeri the opportunity to get back past the Williams down the pit straight. Santeri not having a good start to this race, down 2 positions, trying to regain one of them, but Isma with that strong straight line speed, we mentioned it possibly in qualifying, has pulled back ahead of Santeri and is down the inside of Asacombe again. A little bit of wheel banging into turn 1, but Isma gets the move done, and now Santeri is going to try and make it 2 in 2 corners. There's still more contact as Santeri is sliding sideways through the chicane, and that's going to allow Jensen to try and have a run. Jensen, another driver that's had a really good start to this race in the Alpine, but they all sit line astern into the chicane. Asacombe, though, already struggling in the race, as we've seen so many times this season.
Yeah, Asacombe just finding himself getting shuffled down the order at the moment. You can see the positions gained there on the left-hand side. Fusilio, the biggest winner on 4 places. Good first lap as well for Cornet and Max Vissel. Jaquita and H-Eagle both dropping down, and there is a bit of front wing damage on H-Eagle's car. Well, there was. That's why he's ended up coming to the pits. And we've also seen a tiny bit of front wing damage on Max Vissel. Only 4%, so shouldn't really affect him too much at the moment, as Matthew Alder is just stretching away. Wow. It's like being in 2012, not 2022, watching a Red Bull just get at the front of the field and leave everyone for dust. 2.2 seconds, 2.6 there it extends to at the end of the first lap. And we saw a bit of this from him in France. We talked about how well Isma did. Matthew Alder, of course, was winning by an absolute country mile before he ended up getting that late puncture at the French Grand Prix. He'll be hoping he doesn't have any effect of that. Things just starting to settle down then as we come on to lap 3.
Yeah, starting to settle down now. Like you say, everyone's just starting to slot into line and figure out where they can be in this race. The closest person, I think, to making a move is Casper at the moment, trying to work his way forwards, but he's not close enough to the back of Fusillo into turn 1 to make a move on the Mercedes, so he'll stay in 13th for the time being. But it's Matthew Alder seeing different track conditions to everybody else. He is just completely driving off into the distance. A near 3-second gap in 2 and a bit laps is ridiculously fast, even fit by his standards. It's almost like he's in F0.5 at this point. He is so much faster than the rest of the field, and despite his slight front wing damage from Max Vissel, he's holding on to 4th pretty well. Isma's not on the back of him, he's not handling the back of the Ferrari, and Max is just now starting to close back in on the likes of Dederko and Valentin further in front. So yeah, even though it is slight front wing damage, not game changing really for Max. It may be a bit of a nuisance, but it's not going to be too much of a problem for him if he can maintain this pace. Yeah,
man, he's doing a good job. Whether we do see him change it at the pit stop, I think is very, very unlikely at the moment. Will cost him more time perhaps in pit loss than it would do in anything else. We're on board with Casper then, as he just locks up. You'll see a lot more of those in the wet conditions. It is very common to lock both of the fronts even in these intermediate conditions. You can just see the yellow light on his dashboard. For those that are a bit more unfamiliar with the F1 game, that means he's low on fuel, and it's nothing to worry about. You'll burn less fuel in the wet conditions, and you'll burn less fuel as the car gets lighter as the race goes on as well. So nothing really for Casper to worry about as he does drop a bit further back, and gaps are really starting to open up in the field. Matthew Older now 3.4 seconds ahead of this battle, Valentin and Danerco. And Danerco, he'll be pretty desperate to get ahead of Valentin. It looks like maybe just being held up a tiny bit at the moment. He's stayed constantly within about half a second for this entire race.
Yeah, it seems that I guess it's more of a distraction than anything else. I don't think Valentin's fully in the way until there. Danerco really closing in on the inside of that chicane. So it is now starting to look like Danerco is being held up ever so slightly, but the couple of laps beforehand, it was maybe more of a distraction having the McLaren directly in front of him than anything else. But you mentioned it at the end of qualifying that it could be intermediate conditions, but it could be close to slicks. We're not seeing really very intermediate conditions, which makes me think that these tyres are going to burn out maybe even quicker than we first expected, because we're not seeing any spray coming off these intermediate tyres at all when it is barely raining. So I imagine a lot of these drivers are possibly nursing some overheating tyres, because it definitely looks that way, doesn't it? Especially for Valentin, that car is understeering all over the place in the middle part of the lap. So I'm wondering if he's just struggling with overheating tyres in conditions that don't look particularly wet. So maybe that's his problem, as Matthew Older's lead now 4.2 seconds. My oh my, that is a massive gap by the end of the fourth lap of the race.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the tyre wear from the test system. ! Help, and head over to the live chat, not the top chat, if you want to take a look at the TAS commands. Their tyre wear is quite high on some of these cars. Like, there's absolutely zero chance anyone's doing a no-stop strategy. Looking at Valentin and Max Wiesel, they might be pushing it to do a one-stop strategy, and they are understeering quite a lot. Max Wiesel, obviously, with that front wing damage, perhaps a bit more understandable that he's wearing his fronts out, but tyre wear at the moment on Valentin, it looks like he's almost done a lot more on his tyres, considering what he's got compared to Matthew Older, compared to Danerco as well. So really just finding it tough, and that overheating tyres is just a vicious circle. You overheat the tyres, you get less grip, you slide more, you overheat the tyres a bit more, and so on and so forth. Anyone who's spun as much as I have on the F1 game knows exactly what I'm talking about with the rears after you've ended up facing in the wrong direction. And a few of these drivers just struggling means the undercut could still be powerful. We don't normally see as much of a powerful undercut in these conditions, as the intermediates are usually a very predictable tyre. But we might have a few drivers, especially those that are doing better on tyre management, almost paradoxically, might be the first ones to come in because they know they can get an undercut, and they might know they can get those tyres to the end.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem at the moment for the likes of Valentin and Max Wiesel. I think obviously Max's slight damage may be playing into the fact that his tyres are wearing out a little bit more, so that's a real problem. As Danerco, look at the straight line speed on that Aston without DRS, really closing into the back of the McLaren, but the straight's just not long enough. But he has forced Valentin deep in towards turn number 1, so can Danerco get the switchback coming out of turn number 3 and get the run on the McLaren up towards the end of the first sector? He's got a better run out of the corner. He's on his ERS once again down the straight. Valentin is as well, but the Aston Martin seems a lot faster in a straight line down the inside, kind of half committing to a move down the inside that will allow Valentin to hold it around the outside, and they're just going to get stuck by side here. They're kind of argy-barging each other all the way up and towards turns 5 and 6. Can Danerco go all the way around the outside? Yes, he can. So even with the unpreferred line on the outside of the corner and a not particularly great run out of the chicane, Danerco's got the move done, but that goes to show you how much time you lose going for a move in the intermediate conditions. They are now 6.5 seconds off of Matthew Older, who just continues to drive away at this point in the race. And you can definitely tell Valentin is really struggling with his tyres. He is sliding all over the place. I think that McLaren, like you say, is going to struggle even to do a one-stop at this rate. He's nearly a quarter of the way through his intermediate tyres already.
Yeah, certainly. If I was Red Bull, it's good news for them that Matthew Older is winning, but I'd be telling him to lock up at a chicane, because he's not going to get any TV time if he just ends up streaking away by about a second a lap at the moment. And yeah, Danerco 7/10 off his personal best with all of that battling. But this is going to be the thing to watch now. Can Danerco break away from Valentin? I think already catching up to Matthew Older in this race is going to be a bit of a big ask, as Philip Walters gets a run on Jensen. Can only imagine Jensen's had a bit of a wobble coming out of the final corner, because that was done very early on the straight, and Walters is up into 8th place. 3 seconds this battle is behind that second train, you can almost say, the chasing pack of Danerco down to Santarius. Jensen just gets a bit of wheel spin coming out of turns 2 and 3. And any possibility he had of fighting that move back is gone. Whether we'll see him defending soon from his Shazoo teammate Brock and Cornet as well, we'll have to wait and see. But crucial move maybe for the Constructors' Championship, Walters. Looks like he's going to be picking up that extra point for Williams. They are still leading the championship. I think as things stand at the moment, they would still be leading at the end of the night, even if the winner of the Drivers' Championship, the leader at least, looks to be heading over to Milton Keynes and Matthew Alder in that Red Bull. 7 seconds ahead then at the end of lap 7. And this lap seems to have answered the question of was Daneco being held up? Not too much, because Valentin really sticking with him.
Yeah, staying with him a lot better than I expected, to be honest. I did expect Max Wiesel to start hounding the back of that McLaren, but it's not really been the case. I do wonder how much that front wing damage is hampering that Ferrari ever so slightly. On board, it doesn't really seem to be visibly affecting him too much, but if it is causing him to wear out his tyres more, then it's just going to drop off a lot quicker than the people around him. So I imagine that when Max comes into the pit lane, that should free up Isma a bit more, and Isma maybe can have a run at Valentin. But as it stands, they're just kind of stuck in a train without the use of DRS. They can't find a way through unless the driver in front is making a mistake. And we've seen it a few times already on this game that the driver at the head of your queue actually tends to struggle a bit more with overheating on the tyres. It's just kind of a feature really of this game, that the dirty air physics in this game can make the car slide a little bit more, make it turn a little bit better, which in the end can actually help your tyres. So I'm wondering whether actually being at the head of the queue, as Daneco is now, is actually not really helping his tyres at all and making them worse. So maybe Valentin, maybe a blessing in disguise that he's dropped back behind the Aston.
Yeah, we can't see that Daneco has got any damage as Valentin becomes the first driver to pick up penalties, and H-Eagle instantly follows a long way off the back of the field. The Red Bulls bookending the field. We can't see any damage he might have to the floor, to the side pod. He did take a bit of a run over the curb, but generally on these damage settings you don't really get a lot of that. That's more on simulation. Daneco, he's been a bit closer to Matthew Alder on this lap in terms of pace, but Matthew's still streaking away by about half a second of a lap, and Daneco is holding on from Valentin, and he's not used as much ERS on this lap, so whether he's just trying to save a bit and recover, as Valentin has a bit of a slide through the final corner, that just allows Daneco to stretch his legs that tiny bit. Someone who is closing up to the back of these, though, is Philip Walters. He was 3 seconds off the back of this train, and you can see he's on his own at the moment, leaving Jensen and Bock and the rest of the pack behind in his spray. I think you're using a lot of his electrical energy to try and close up to Santeri and the others, especially if he can get in penalty range, because it looks like trains are going to be a feature of this entire race. Keeping it clean could be extremely important.
Yeah, it could be very important, and I think Wouters' pace here could be a bit of a threat, like you say, to some of the drivers in front. If he can kind of close up to the back of this pack in time for the pit stops, he could be a real threat in this race. Just looking at previous lap times, Wouters is the only other driver in this field in the 25s, along with Matthew Alder. Matthew Alder doing a 25.3 as his best lap of the race that he set last time around. Philip Wouters, a 25.8 is his best lap of the race. Nobody else is in the 25s. So Wouters at the moment really the only one within any sort of pace range of Matthew Alder. So if he can get close to the back of Santeri and Asacombe and then pit earlier before them, he could be a massive threat to maybe jump inside the top 5. And like you say, with Valentin's penalty, could be a potential top 4. We've seen this a couple of times from Philip Wouters, where he's qualified outside of the top 10, but in unlikely circumstances has pulled his way to the front of the field. So this kind of race may be one that suits the Williams driver a little bit more.
Yeah, quali for show, racing for dough. That's where you get on points in Formula 1. Nothing given out for qualifying, unless it's a sprint race which counts at qualifying. Well, that just starts confusing all the different people. No DNFs in the first 9 laps, and also, I think given how we was expecting this, given how difficult of a track it is to keep it clean, no one without any warnings at the moment. Every driver has got at least one warning, and it is only Isma, Cornet, Fusilio and Casper who are on one sole warning at the moment. So everyone else either has a penalty or is just one away from a penalty at this moment in time. Daneco looks as though he's feeling a bit more comfortable now. He's sort of stopped the rot, stopped Matthew escaping, keeping that gap consistent, starting to drop Valentin, and Max is also starting to get dropped. So this could be an opportunity for Isma, Asacombe and Santeri to think about working their way up the field, and especially Isma. He can't allow, he's allowed Matthew Alder to get too far away. I think barring any incident happening, safety cars, Matthew is looking pretty good. I know that's risky to say as a commentator on lap number 10, and I apologise in advance to everyone involved with Parnell Racing if I've cursed him, but he is looking good. Isma needs to get ahead of Max for that extra points, and also to possibly, at the end of the race, stay within penalty range of Valentine, and also keep in touch with Danerco, who's still got a fantastic chance of winning this title.
Yeah, he's got to make a move at some point, hasn't he? He's got to try something different. Stuck in this pack, he's just not going anywhere. He's got a brilliant run out of the final corner this time around. I think Max has recognised that, trying to defend a little bit in a straight line from Isma, but doesn't really need to, because obviously without the DRS, there's nothing Isma can do, and all that Isma has really done down that straight is burnt off the 40% ERS that he had, trying to get closer to Max and not really doing anything. So he's just maybe getting a little bit frustrated. He's got a better run through the chicane, but again, just doesn't have the straight to be able to pull the move off. So the Williams driver's got to think of something different here at this point in the race. We don't really know what his tyre wear's looking like. So if he's got good tyre wear, surely he's got to come in early. He can't just sit and wait for everybody else to pit, because he then runs the risk of falling back again. We saw this from him last time out in Brazil, where he stayed out longer in the pit stop phase than everybody else, and he just fell down the field, and despite having better pace, couldn't really cover the positions that he lost. So this time around, Isma's strategy-wise has got to be more aggressive.
Yeah, talking about trying something different, Yakita came into the pits, no damage on his car, we don't think. 15th place he comes out in some free air on a fresh set of intermediate tyres, and with the tyre wear he was doing, he could still easily get towards the end of the race on that set. So interesting to watch. We'll just see what Yakita's pace is going to be. You can see he's gained a bit of time on Fabi, Casper and those ahead, but definitely worth keeping an eye on his lap times, as will the other drivers be doing, because if you are Isba, if you are Asacombe and Santeri, even if you brought Cornet, Fusilio, Casper, you're stuck in one of these trains with a right on the rear wing of the cars. In front as Jensen. I don't know whether he was on his way into the pit lane then or not, but he spins across the pit lane, very close to collecting Fusilio, who is copying what his teammate were doing. Mercedes going early. Fusilio heading out of the pits. Clearly, his teammates said, these fresh intermediate tyres are good. Let's get in now. We might be able to get ourselves up the order.
Yeah, definitely the two Mercs drivers just in touching base with one another just to see what's working at the moment, and Fusilio a bit further down. Gotta try something like you say, and I think the spin for Jensen there has actually just triggered that a little bit more, and Jensen has spun again coming out of turn number 3, so very hot intermediate tyres. He's not been able to recover them. That's another spin for the Alpine, so his race is pretty much done for unless there is another safety car at this some sort of safety car in this race, but as it stands that looks unlikely to happen, and there goes Fusilio back past the Alpine already. So Fusilio, a lot of free air in front. We'll see what his pace is, see if he can work his way forwards. And again, the two Mercs seem very good on their tyre wear, so they can probably get away with this strategy. One driver who couldn't is Max Wiesel. Looking at his tyre wear, Max Wiesel's tyres are looking terrible at this point in the race. They are very worn, as you can see him sliding through the stadium section. One person maybe to keep an eye on who has really good tyre wear, that lead Alfa Romeo down there of Santeri. He's looking very good tyre wear wise in P7 at the moment, so could he be the one that maybe triggers the early pit stops?
It's worth a shot. I think if you're in the train at the moment, there's not a lot you can do. With definition of insanity, trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Sticking in the slipstream doesn't seem to be working for any of these drivers. It does it in the dry when you've got the DRS, it does it in the wet when you haven't got the DRS. Saying that, Santeri did get a bit of a good one there on Asacombe. Cornet, the next one to head into the pits. We'll see where he comes out. You would expect him to be behind both Fusilio and Yakita, and that says all you need to know.
Wow.
Fastest lap of the race for Yakita, a 1:25.2, 7 tenths faster than what anyone else was managing on that lap. These fresh set of intermediates are really good, and you've got to use them in free air, because we've already seen if you're stuck in a train behind other cars, doesn't matter if you look quicker through most of the lap, the dirty air just finishes you off, and you're not really able to use them. So if I was some of these drivers, if I was Isma, Asacombe, Santeri, anyone who's pretty close to the car in front, I'd definitely be thinking about coming into the pits on this lap, as that is another yellow flag, and that is a broken front wing for Jensen. Will that debris cause a VSC, cause a safety car, which might just head the drivers towards coming into the pits? Doesn't look like it has done. Looks like everything is nice and clear. On board with Danerco, the second place man, and he is going for it. He is heading his way into the pits, and really the first one of the front runners, Danerco, I think, seeing the fastest lap times, and he's thinking, right, I just need to defend this second place and maybe try to gain any time that I can on Matthew by doing the undercut.
Yeah, got to try. He's it's almost seeming like he was trying to cover off what was happening behind, and the fact that everybody behind us stayed out, maybe seeing Daneco come in and think, actually, there's no point coming in and following the Aston Martin if I'm just going to stay behind. So, yeah, Daneco in, back out into nice clean air once again. So, we'll see what time he can take out of Matthew Older, but Matthew Older's lead was so massive that I don't think it's really going to matter to Matthew when he pits. He can just extend for as long as he wants, come in, put another set of intermediates on, and be fast again at the end of the race. So, I think for Daneco, this is more about solidifying second. He was starting to pull away a bit more from Valentin. This now, I think, has probably put the nail in the coffin for anyone thinking about a second place in this race. I think Daneco should have that covered by now. So, yeah, I would say that was more about covering second place off. By the way, Nikita's fastest lap, that was 1.6 seconds faster than his previous personal best. That's how much time he gained in that as Jensen has retired in the pit lane. Probably unsurprisingly. Now Max Wiesel, another time penalty. So Isma now really got to get the hurry up. He could gain 2 places here on penalties and be back on the podium again, and that would be some sort of nice damage limitation in the championship.
Yeah, it would. Looks like a top 3 in the championship. Looking good in a different order for top 3 in this race then. But Isma is nearly already the 3 seconds that he needs outside of Valentin. He stays out there. Asacombe coming into the pit. Seems to have recovered after having that bit of a tough start earlier. And that is the AlphaTauri on his way down the pit lane. And yeah, Fusilio setting pretty quick lap times. Not as fast as what we were seeing from his teammate. And all these drivers that haven't pitted are in the 26ers. Apart from one. Matthew Older leading this race. 10 seconds at the moment without any penalties. Of course, still yet to come into the pits. He is looking very good. He's extending this stint as long as he dares. If he extends the track too much, he might pick up the odd penalty. And you'd say, keeping it clean, barring any safety cars, that is probably the only things that could cost him. Matthew can be prone to picking up the odd penalty. Maybe he can just afford to take it a bit easier with the lead he has got at this moment in time on lap number 15. Valentin and Max Wiesel still struggling on their tyres, still staying out to ensure they can get their second set towards the end. Although Valentin seems to have picked up the pace. He's not losing as much all of a sudden. He's putting in a very good performance.
Yeah, I think he's just kind of calmed down a little bit now after those opening laps. He was defending quite hard from Daneco and then trying to repass. Now he's got a little bit of clean air around him. He can just focus on his own race, and he seems to be into a nice rhythm now in that McLaren. Of course, that penalty looming over him, but at the moment, Matsusa behind him is doing a very good job for him in holding up the pack so that he's not going to suffer too much by having that penalty. We'll see if anyone's into the pit lane this time around. Max Wiesel into the pit lane, which is, for a driver with that amount of tyre wear or that first stint, that's fairly early. You've got to say for Max Wiesel, if he's struggling that much with tyre wear, he could be a bit of a sit and duck. Later on, Santeri and Wouters both in again behind him. So, again, Isma staying out longer. This didn't work for him in Brazil. I don't think it's going to work for him here because of how strong the undercut looks. And we've already seen so far, it doesn't matter how good your tyres are, it is nigh on impossible to overtake in normal conditions here.
Yeah, I think Isma's missed the trick by not going the lap before here. If you'd have followed Max Wiesel into the pits, he's going to be on the same age tyres and he's still going to come out behind him. So, kind of get why he stayed out this time. It's just whether he loses any places to Asacombe and to Santeri behind. And you can see straight away, Asacombe, who was behind Isma, has jumped Max Wiesel, who was ahead of Isma. So, that is all the indication you need. Asacombe could be close to jumping Valentin here. Maybe there's a chance for the AlphaTauri, who's only scored 1 point all season once, and that was with a 4th place at Austria. Maybe there's even a possibility we could see an AlphaTauri on the podium here. Lap number 16 out of 36. The Santeri just trying to climb all over the back of Max Wiesel at the moment. Wouters, let's not forget, he was showing some decent pace earlier on. He's in 10th place looking for some points. We'll just get up on the screen. You can see the tyres, but we'll make it a bit easier for you so you can see who still has to pit. The top 4 and Barbie still have to pit, as that is another penalty for Max Wiesel. Looks like, again, it is all just starting to go wrong for him in the race. His championship ambitions falling apart with every track extension.
Yeah, really falling apart for Max, isn't it, at this point in the championship? He needed the top 3 in the championship to not have the best race today, especially Isma and Matthew Older, and he needed to capitalise, but it's kind of the opposite at the moment, isn't it? Max is just starting to fall down the field, and crucially with that pit stop, Max didn't repair the damage on his car, so whether he just decided not to because of the time loss, or whether he couldn't because it's damaged on a part of a car that can't be repaired, we're not quite sure. But either way, that damage that he's not repaired means he's still going to be on the back foot in the second half of this race. And Asacombe, yeah, sitting very comfortable now in a possible P3 position. Santeri now with a time penalty as well, so it just keeps playing into Asacombe's hands. All the drivers he's racing on track around him are picking up time penalties, and Assecolm is sitting pretty comfortably. The only problem for Assecolm here is that, well, look how far Dinerco has gone on up the road. By pitting that few laps earlier, Dinerco was completely cleared off into the distance. His second place is more than comfortable, and Valentin, actually, by staying out a few laps longer, hasn't lost that much time. So, as it stands, Valentin is still just about holding on to a net third.
Yeah, he's doing a decent job, actually, on that tyre life there. We said at the start maybe just struggling a bit, but just got things under control, found a different way of driving, adapting to the ever-changing intermediate conditions. It's not like it is in the dry where, you know, if it's dry, it is dry. Obvious statement. If you're in the intermediates, it can be wetter on some laps than it can others. You're always having to just adapt, change your lines, and try to find that extra grip. Dinerco there in 4th place at the moment, and net second. We've still got Matthew, Isma, and Casper yet to pit, as Assecolm does set the fastest lap of the race, and Valentin all over the back of Fabi here. We've not seen too many on-track overtakes, and this one, bit of assistance from the slipstream, bit of assistance from the different life of tyres. Down the inside goes to McLaren. Fabi's going to fight for all he's worth here, maybe just trying to help his teammate out a tiny bit. And do you know what? He's doing an excellent job of defending this. I think, unfortunately, though, it is all going to be in vain. Valentin gets the better exit. And there we go. He is now up into 5th, and that's allowed Assecolm to just close that tiny little bit. You'd be expecting, as we say hello to everyone else that is coming from all the different tiers, F2 and F3, and the others that have finished here on PSGL, you'd be expecting, now that we're at the halfway point, not going to be too long before the rest of those who haven't pitted make their way in.
Yeah, it's not going to be long. Surely they've got to come in now. We're at the halfway point in the race, so a lot of these drivers that have stayed out are either hoping for a safety car or a weather change, or they're just hoping that the tyres that people have pitted onto now will die by the end of the race. Matthew Alder's staying out. Isma is now finally into the pit lane then for the Williams, so we'll see where he comes out. He maybe thought that by staying out he had a bit more, had a bit more tyre life and a bit more pace in those tyres that he could use, but with all the drivers that he was racing setting personal bests and fastest laps of the race, I doubt that's possibly been the case for the Williams man. We'll see where he comes out relative to the drivers around. It's crucial for him that he's ahead of Assecolm and Fabi coming out of the pit lane. And has Isma been able to do that? No, he has not. He's going to be behind pretty much all of them. That is pretty much a disaster strategically for Isma. He's now behind Santeri as well. We said this, he's going to go down the inside of Santeri, but we said this in Brazil. He stayed out too late and lost all the track position and couldn't gain it back. It seems he's just repeating the same mistake here.
Yeah, he is. He's lost out to Assecolm. That's the only place I think he's really lost in all of this. But Assecolm does not have any penalties and is currently being held up by Fabi, who's just leading this train. Him and the top two of Matthew Alder and Casper still yet to pit, as I think there we saw Assecolm get into the back of Fabi a bit, and I think Max Wiesel also helped out, and that shoved Fabi offline, who's realised, yeah, not a lot I can do about this at this moment in time. The Alfa Tauri goes through, the Ferrari goes through, the Williams goes through, the Alfa Romeo has to stick behind Fabi, who's just run wide there coming through turn number 7, and that allows Santeri to make his way through. So did a good job holding up that train. Unfortunately, in the end, was not able to back off in the lead of this race. Matthew Alder, he's pulled out an entire pit stop. He's just going on as long as he can, and he can afford to do this. He can afford to make sure his tyres are nice and good at the end. He can afford to wait for a bit of a safety car because he was so far clear of everyone else in that first stint. Casper makes his way in. It's going to be about a 28-second lead then for Matthew. Still got a big pit stop to make. Still got 17 laps to go as Valentin, now that he's got a bit of free air, sets the fastest lap of the race. And this is going to be important for him. He's got that gap up to 3 seconds over Assecolm.
Yeah, but Assecolm being held up behind Fabi there has played beautifully into Valentin's hands. So he's now got the gap, like you said, to that queue behind. And Isma now going for the move on Max down the inside of turn 1. So he's got the move done crucially on the Ferrari now. Fresher tyres and Max not repairing that damage has given the advantage back to Isma. So now it's a straight fight between Isma and Assecolm for 4th on the road here. Can they close back in on Valentin, or can Valentin just continue to pull away in this race? And Valentin actually is starting to take a bit of time back out of Dinerco here, so it sounds maybe a little bit of lease of life on these second intermediate tyres. Maybe enjoys the fresher tyres a bit more, and of course his tyres are 3 laps younger than Dinerco's, so Dinerco going to struggle a bit more as the race comes to an end. And despite the fact that Valentin has a penalty, he's still a threat for second place in this race. If Dinerco does pick up that final warning and get a penalty, then Valentin's not out of this one for second position at the moment. He's just taken another 3/10 out of Dinerco in the middle sector. So Valentin looking much more comfortable in these second set of tyres.
Yeah, definitely not one you can write out on this occasion yet, Valentine. We could see other drivers picking up penalties, of course. We could see other drivers picking up damage as the fuel comes off and they start to get a bit more confident as the race goes on. But you can see how hard he's pushing. That is another fastest lap of the race. And a reminder, here in PSGL, you do get points for the fastest lap as long as you finish in the top 10. It is a slightly different point scheme with 16 for the winner going down towards 1 for 10th position. It's going to be one to watch out for them. With how close things are at the end of the season, that fastest lap point could be something we see with different drivers pushing for. Maybe that's why Matthew Alder is deciding to stay out longer, so he does have the fresher tyres at the end of the race, of course. On board with Santeri, just trying to push his way ahead of Max Wiesel. Will finish ahead of him at the moment because of the penalty situation. You can see there H. Eagle and Max, both on 6 seconds of penalties. Casper, Brock, Santeri and Valentine currently with 3. Given how many early warnings we've seen, I think everyone has just calmed down after a lap on of the race and realised they need to be careful to avoid getting any penalties. On board with Fusilio, getting held up by Farby at the moment. Well, I think he's also just maybe praying for a bit of a safety car or just thinking it's worth trying something different.
Yeah, I think worth trying something different for Farby at this point in the race, hoping for something. I mean, the conditions still, while they are intermediate conditions, they look as close to dry intermediate conditions as you can possibly get. So I wonder if I move over to slick tyres, but at the moment, yeah, just not really working for Farby, is it? He's just falling back through the field. So those old tyres really struggling now, and he's just got to hope for something else to work into his favour. If Fusilio should hopefully, for his sake, for his race, get past that Ferrari fairly swiftly.
Yeah, still stuck behind him at the moment though, still not really able to get ahead and having a bit of a wobble out the final corner. Not got a lot of ERS either. Isma closing up to Asacombe using all of the energy from that hybrid system. He is determined to get ahead. He knows his 2 points for this move could be important. He knows it also gives him a bit of a chance of catching up to Valentine. A slide through turn number 3 ruins any chance you'd imagine for the rest of this lap, and he is going to have to just stay behind, give it another go, maybe save up his battery, try later on in the race. Even forcing Asacombe into a mistake that gives him a warning and a penalty might just be the way. Matthew Alder still just staying out. His tyres are now looking a bit more worn, 65% on that front left, so don't think it'll be too long before we see Matthew heading into the pits. And with that amount of tyre wear, there's not a possibility he is going to go for the no-stop strategy. Although they've clearly still got some pace in because he's just set his best lap of the race.
Yeah, that's why I just made that little scoff noise, because I don't know how he is finding that pace on those old set of tyres. That is ridiculous pace, isn't it? And the fact that he's pulling away again from Danerco on this lap is pretty astounding. It's completely different league today as Matthew Alder. We've seen this a couple of times in the wet already this season. Silverstone also springs to mind where it was changing conditions and he was on the right strategy that time around. But yeah, his pace in the wet conditions is just unreachable, it seems, at the moment. We said Ismail was a strong driver in the wet, but this is just a completely different league at the moment. And if there's any more weather interference coming towards the end of the season, I'm sure Danerco and Ismail will be very unhappy that could be the case, because we've had a lot of wet weather interference so far this season. I think this must be the 5th or 6th race we've had this season where wet weather has played a part in the race itself. And every time Matthew Alder has pulled it out of the bag and been really strong in those conditions. So they'll be hoping that it stays dry for the rest of the season. Got a yellow flag further down. That is Farby, though, who's gone for a spin. I imagine that's off the side of another car in that chicane. And those tyres now definitely completely cooked at this point in the race. Surely he'll be into the pit lane at the end of this lap.
Yeah, him and Fusilio getting a bit too close for comfort. We've seen Mercedes and Ferrari do that on the odd occasion here at Mexico. Vettel and Hamilton, I think it was, in 2018. And Ferrari now just back it off. I think he realised his race is won. Bet he's wishing he had another week on holiday at the moment. It's not been a good start for Farby as finally Matthew Alder makes his way into the pits, then into slicks going off. Fresh set of intermediates going on. And he is still going to come out comfortably ahead of Danerco, who's not comfortably ahead of Valentine. He's got that gap to less than a second. And it is a big if Valentine can get this move done with the pace he's shown, he might even be able to finish second.
It's definitely a possibility. Valentine, in recent laps especially, has just taken chunks out of Danerco. I don't know if it's Danerco pitting too early off those intermediates and they've already hit a wall or not, but Valentine is really taking half a second, 0.6 of a second out of Danerco a lap. So now that he's within range, can he get the move done? Can he force Danerco into a mistake? And if he can, surely that could be curtains possibly for Danerco championship wise. He'll be really needing a lot of luck in the final rounds to put himself back into contention, because of course he is already 15 points off the championship lead going into this one. So he'll need every point he can get. The last thing he needs is Valentine cruising up to the back of him and possibly overtaking. So yeah, it's bizarre really, isn't it, how it's ebbed and flowed in this top kind of 6 or 7 drivers, how the pace has ebbed and flowed between them. But Valentine really coming on song in the second half of this race. Another driver that's coming on song, Philip Wouters. He is now well within penalty range of Max Wiesel and Santeri at this point in the race. Doesn't need to go anywhere near passing them to get up to 6th, and that would be crucial points for Williams and the manufacturers.
Yeah, Williams not looking in a bad place at the moment. Isma probably going to finish 5th unless he can get a move done on Asacombe, but Walters finishing in 6th will be handy. What is that, 11 points for them in the Constructors? So they'd still lose out a couple to Aston Martin, with Dineco and Cornet being 2nd and 9th for both of them keeping it clean on the penalties. And in fact, Cornet, he's even got half a shot of getting within range of Santeri and Max Wiesel as well, but nothing too much to worry about for Williams. All the championships look like they will be going down to the wire in a few weeks' time at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Isma again just trying to close up to Asacombe using his ERS. Ever since he got close a couple of laps ago, he's not been able to really put the AlphaTauri under that same amount of pressure. It's been a really solid drive so far from the outplayed driver. Asacombe doing a good job to hang on to 4th place. Just doesn't seem to have the pace though to challenge Dineco and Valentine. They say in Formula 1, catching up in what is one thing and overtaking is quite another. Ever since Valentine's got on the back of Dineco, he's just had to sit back, just had to stay within that half a second to a second range where these Formula 1 cars, even on the game where dirty air has less of an effect, they really do not like to be in that range. The one man who's not had to worry about dirty air all race is Matthew Alder, flying his way ahead, 7.2 seconds, just building that gap out again. And that purple middle sector says to me he's going for the bonus point.
Yep, definitely looks like it, doesn't it? I would not be surprised if this is a 23. That would be a massive lap time if you can get a 23 coming in across the line. Fastest lap so far, 24.8 from Valentine, of course. Fusilio now the next driver with a penalty. Matthew Alder crosses the line and he does do a 23.8. He's a second faster than anybody else's fastest lap. It's just astounding the pace that he has had this evening, and that is the gap back up to 7.6 seconds in one lap. So, yeah, Matthew Alder just country miles ahead of the rest of the field at the moment. Another 1.5 seconds taken out of Dineco, and crucially Valentine 0.4 faster than Dineco that last time around. He's getting closer and closer to the back of the Aston Martin, but running out of laps really to make the move count and be able to pull off into the distance. So he's got to force that Aston Martin into a mistake, or hope that those Aston Martin's tyres do die off towards the end. 11 laps to go. Got to keep on that on those tyres of those drivers. And again, it's Max Wiesel looking in the worst state at the moment of those in the lead positions.
Yeah, it is. There was more like purple in sector 1, purple in sector 2, purple in sector 3 from Matthew Alder. There was more purple in that lap than we see on a Team Relentless logo. It was absolutely astonishing. There as Fusilio takes the lawnmower route across turns number 1, 2 and 3. So he's dropped, well, I think he was dropping behind Brock, and I think that just stopped him. So that might be an interesting one. Yakita and Casper getting very close together. Yakita currently in a position to get points on his return to the top tier. Because of penalties, he's just got himself up into 12th place. Brock will be his next target, and I'm sure if he does catch up to Fusilio won't put up too much of a fight. It's getting now or never for these who want to make their moves up through the field. Isma still close to the back of Asacombe with a bit of a lower level of ERS though. Not sure how much he's going to be able to do. Santeri close to Max Wiesel. Doesn't need to get ahead of him to overtake because of the penalty situation. Does possibly need to get ahead to make sure he's safe from Cornet and possibly others at the end of the race if he picks up another 3 seconds. That is how the penalty situation is looking with 10 laps to go. And still, Isma not able to get close enough. It looks like he's had that one opportunity. And since then, Asacombe's just had his number as Brock this time gets the move done ahead of Fusilio a long way before turn number 1. And that's going to be some big news. Isma picking up a time penalty. Any chance he's got to finish in the top 4's probably just vanished.
Yeah, I'm sure that's completely vanished at this point unless something crazy happens at the end of this race. But yeah, that is a crucial mistake there from Isma picking up that penalty. That has completely solidified a 5th place finish in this race at this point. He's not going to be anywhere near Valentine by the end of this one unless Valentine himself makes a mistake, which it looks like likely he's going to do. Asacombe sitting comfortable in 4th now, doesn't have to really push to hold Isma behind anymore. He knows that he's got that 3 seconds, so he doesn't have to be pushing hard, and that makes it easier for Asicum to keep away from a penalty himself. So, yeah, really crucial mistake for our championship leader. And again, the advantage just continues to swing in Matthew Order's favour. He had those 2 rough rounds, but back to his best form again last week, and this week is back to the best probably we've ever seen him. It's just miles ahead and still pulling away, as Max Wiesel now makes it another penalty for that Ferrari driver, and his race just goes from bad to worse, doesn't it? He's going to plummet. At this point, almost out of the points. He's got 12 seconds of penalties now. He is comfortably behind Philip Wouters and Cornet, and in fact Brock, even with his penalty, could be within range of Max Wiesel by the end of this race. So Max Wiesel, I think, got that damage and seems to have just completely given up on this race.
Yeah, let's not forget, it was such a promising start to the season, and it is still looking like it is going to be a very good season for Max Wiesel. Looks like 4th place in the championship, you'd imagine, at worst for him, but starting on pole in race number 1, finishing in second, a second place in France as well. You possibly would have expected a bit more. He's been consistently in the points every race apart from Netherlands, where he failed to make it to the checkered flag. In fact, no one has managed to make it to the points in every single race so far this season, but Max looks like he's just going to miss out. Looks like Fusilio, he's going to drop back as well, having a few problems now with his tyres. Brock's got ahead. Yakita and Kasper have also managed to get ahead of him. And look, big play here to Mr. Hadler. He's doing a very good job, Patrick Hadler, at the moment. 25 laps on that set of intermediates after having pitted early on to fix a bit of damage. Doing very well indeed. Looks like that front left's going to be at risk of going pop anytime soon, so I think he is going to have to make a stop towards the end, but still a respectable foot performance, and fair play to him and Farby for carrying on, and what has, I think, especially for H-Eagle, early on, didn't look like he was going to get a lot from this, but he stuck it out there.
Yeah, stuck it out and continuing on, like you say, and you've got to be there, really, haven't you, to pick up the pieces if anything happens at the end of this race. You could understand a retirement maybe in the last couple of laps, but there's still the opportunity of a safety car to bring them back into play, so that they've got to stay out in hopes that something like that happens. They can't just give up on the opportunity before it comes. So good on them for sticking it out. Like you say, it's Fusilio into the pit lane for a set of soft compound tyres. That is really interesting. We've mentioned it a couple of times that it doesn't look all that wet. We've not seen really any spray from the tyres in this race. It's not raining that hard. We'll see if Fusilio has got any grip or not. We'll wait and see, but could be a telling point if these tyres are fast. But I think immediately coming out of the pit lane, there was a lot of wheel spin there. We'll see him at turn number 1, whether the car washes wide or whether he's able to keep on the racing line in towards turn number 1 on those softs. But I think pretty much immediately you can tell that the softs are not the choice. It was worth the risk for Fusilio. He had the penalties and he was out of the points, but I think very clear to say that the slick tyres are not the way to go.
I mean, he did make the racing line. He made it at about the same speed I would manage to do in my Ford Focus there, which probably I'd rather have those tyres on than I would these slick Pirellis at the moment, especially if you're driving on the pad. He's really, I think he's just doing it for something slightly different there. He was probably hoping for a bit more drifting than the masses of understeer he looks like he's got at the moment, handling more like an oil tanker than a Formula 1 car. Fusilio wasn't going to get anything. He's still not going to get anything, but I'm not sure there was ever really a positive side to the gamble he was trying in that one. Santeri's really closed up to the back of Max Wiesel then. Max has dropped back from Isma, but no real chance with a lack of ERS there to be able to work his way ahead of Max. He doesn't need to anyway, because Max keeps picking up plenty more penalties. I believe that is now 15 seconds for the Ferrari driver. He's really struggling in this one and will drop outside of the points with that. It's not gone well, and now he's run deep into 4 and 5. Will that give Santeri an opportunity? The Alfa Romeo just too far behind and will have to follow around for longer. Walters not really caught too much up to the back of these. He knows that he doesn't need to. And also, if he is communicating with Isma, I'd be telling Walters, just stick where you are at the moment, because you're going to get 6th. If you go a bit faster, you might end up stealing 5th off me, and that would not really do anyone any favours.
No, it definitely wouldn't do anyone any favours for Williams, would it, if Wouters ends up beating his teammate to the line on penalties. So yeah, maybe a bit of communication there from Wouters to just keep out of the 3-second range of Isma, but keep within range of Max Wiesel and Santeri, which of course is really easy for him to do at the moment with the amount of penalties the two drivers in front do have at this point in the race. So yeah, should be a fairly comfortable position at this point in the race now for Philip Wouters. He's got no pressure from behind. He continues to pull away from Cornet as Max Wiesel is into the pit lane and is spared into the pit lane to add another penalty to that, and is retired in the pit lane, which I think shows that he had kind of completely given up on that race. I think he knew that he was not going to finish in the points even even if he'd finished 6th on the road, he wasn't going to finish in the points with the amount of penalties. That is his race over and done with, which actually I think could save Brock a point in that race, actually. So that's helped out the Haas driver nicely there. Obviously has a penalty himself, would lose out to Yukita, but as it stands, will stay inside the top 10. So Haas will get back on the points board after a rough round in Brazil as it stands.
Yeah, they will. Managing to get some points. Won't be good enough, though, to send them off the bottom of the constructor standings. Both of the McLarens are looking racy. We've seen Valentine for the entire race looking pretty fast, stuck on the back of Danerco for the last few laps. Here's another man who's trying to work his way up. Casper just going to miss out some points at the moment. It is the farewell tour, of course, for Casper Janssen, who will be retiring from F1 League Racing at the end of this game. We'll have to see if he does make any one-off appearances on the next one, whether he'll even bother with F1 2022 at all, but I'm sure he'd like to get a bit of a good end for the season. Just stuck on Yakita, can't really get ahead of him at the moment, and that's been the story of this final stint. It's been the story of the entire race, really, unless cars in front have made a mistake, unless you've had a massive delta in straight line speed, a massive delta in tyre wear, you've really struggled to get any moves done in these conditions. Valentine again closing up to Danerco, low on the ERS, no DRS to help him, and he is just finding things a bit difficult at the moment. Needs to be careful here, can't afford to send one on Danerco and get things completely wrong, because he's not gonna pull 3 seconds away of Danerco, that is one thing for sure. And also, if he picks up another penalty, he'll drop behind Asacombe, and that would ruin a chance of getting a first podium in the top tier.
Yeah, it would cost him big time, wouldn't it, if he got another penalty? But I think more of a problem for Valentine at the moment is that it seems like Danerco is actually holding Valentine up, and Asacombe is now starting to re-catch these two. So the gap was about 4.5 seconds a few laps ago. It's now down to 3.6. Asacombe is continuing to close in on Valentine with 5 laps left to go in this race. Valentine can't find a way through on Danerco, and it's just starting to get held up by the Aston. And I think Valentine's recognised that and is trying to put pressure on Danerco to either get the move done and get clean air, or pushing Danerco to go a bit faster, because at the moment he's just going to drop out of the podium places. Asacombe taking another 10th out of him in the middle sector, so it's teetering on the edge now. Valentine looking for his first podium, I believe, in this division, really holding on against a driver who's also looking for his first podium in this division and only his 2nd point scorer of the season. So Asacombe will be pushing like mad to try and get that podium for AlphaTauri, and Valentine will be pushing Danerco like mad, telling him to speed up.
Yeah, indeed, and that might actually force Valentine's hand, even if he's quite comfortable to just stick behind Danerco. He might be tempted here to just go for that move to try and see if he can break away, because there you go, it's effectively a 3-second gap between himself and Asacombe. Fusilio picks up another time penalty. His 1-lap escapade on the soft tyres coming to a very brief end. It is going to be last place, unfortunately, for Fusilio. Yakita looks as though he's going to pick up at least 1 point, possibly a couple, in the other Mercedes. Cornet picking up a penalty as well, so that could just save Santeri, even though he didn't look like he was in too much of a trouble situation. And I think just to see how much Danerco's pace has dropped off, Matthew Alder, 13.2 seconds ahead at the moment after 33 laps. Let's not forget, he lost quite a lot with the undercut as well. You could argue he's been at least on average 6 or 7 tenths a lap faster than everyone else. Considering the entire field was separated by 7 tenths in qualifying, this is a fantastic achievement, and really a bit scary for everyone else. We saw Rain get turned off for the Dutch Racing PC tier. How are some of these? I'd be saying we don't want Rain anymore this season. There's nothing we can do about the Red Bull in these conditions.
Yeah, it's just untouchable in the wet, isn't he? Absolutely untouchable as it stands. And like you say, with the strategy he was on, he pitted, well, as you can see, the best part of 9 to 10 laps later than everybody else on the same set of intermediate tyres. So he was that fast with better tyre wear pretty much than everybody else in the field. So he was using less of the tyres to go that much faster. And with that much time taken out of him in the pit stop phase, you could probably say if he'd pitted at the same time as the people around him, he'd be the best part of a pit stop ahead of the rest of the field. He just hasn't needed to have that gap. He's just pitted later so that he can get the fastest lap, and no one has come anywhere near close to touching it since. So, yeah, Matthew Alder here, it looks incredibly dominant. It could have been even more dominant, but he's put himself on a strategy that is not favourable at all, but it didn't matter. He just had that much of a pace advantage that it didn't matter what strategy he was on. He could just disappear from the rest of the field. But further down, Asacombe now, look how close it is, 3.1. He is tantalisingly close to his first podium in PSGL F1.
Yeah, he's going to be, I'm sure, eager to try and find a bit of pace in the final few laps. H-Eagle comes into the pits and he's finally had to ditch that set of the intermediate tyres. That's the other good thing for Matthew Alder. None of his title rivals and none of his title rivals' teammates are in a position to do a late pit stop and maybe take that fastest lap point off of him. Walters and Cornet both want to score points at the moment, which is good for them in the constructors. Williams and Aston Martin respectively. It looks like Red Bull are going to be the biggest winners in all of that, as Fusilio gets a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. H. Eagle comes out then on a fresh set. He'll be warned by his teammate, I'm sure, not to take that fastest lap point. And there we go. Asacombe almost sets his personal best lap of the race. Only 21 thousandths off it. Is within 3 seconds ahead of Valentin. Valentin needs to get a shift on, but just can't get close enough to Danerco through the final corner, and has stared at the back of that Aston Martin ever since the pit stops.
Yeah, it's bizarre as well to think that when Danerco came out of the pit lane ahead of Valentin, it was the best part of 4.5 seconds. And we saw in the first half of this race, Valentin struggled so much on those intermediate tyres with just sliding all over the place. It looked like he was overheating the tyres pretty much every corner. So how it is just completely reversed in the second half of the race is a little bit bizarre to watch, especially with the conditions themselves not really changing at all. The only thing that's really changed in these cars in this race is the fuel burning off. So maybe it's just proving that Valentin's a bit more suited to the car in lower fuel. That would obviously explain as well why he is so strong in qualifying. But yeah, just so bizarre that these two drivers seem to have had completely opposite races at 2 different points. So, and now Valentin is really being held up for it. He's only 2 tenths behind Danerco, but at this point, unless he gets a move done down towards turn 1, you've got to say it's too little too late. Asako now 2.5 seconds behind us, comfortably within range now.
Yeah, he is. Valentin, he's got to go for it into turn number 1. He really hasn't got a choice now if he wants to get his first podium in the top tier. Danerco getting a slightly better run there. You can just see Valentin struggling, fighting at the steering wheel, coming through turn number 17. And I think Danerco realises he's under pressure. How much would he defend this move, though, if Valentin threw one down the inside? Even Daniel Ricciardo's not going to think about it from this far back, though. And I think Valentin realises it's been a good effort, but 4th is the best he is going to get on this occasion. Still looking back from the Aston Martin. How's the runs coming through turn number 4? Valentin losing a lot more of the curve there. They don't give you a lot of traction in the dry, never mind the wet. And he may well have shot his bolt a bit too early with this one, and Valentin just sticking behind. Nothing he can do. Casper got ahead of Yakita, trying to close up to Brock, but it looks as though Casper might just miss out on points. Yakita's tyres, he was the first one to pit for that set of intermediates. Looked good at the time. Now just starting to suffer the consequences from that strategy. Matthew Alder coming through the final sector. Got pole position in qualifying. We said when he does well in qualifying, he invariably does well in the race. He's looked untouchable in this one from the word go. Valentin got close into turn 1. No one else has got close since. Matthew Alder takes the win and takes the championship lead with 4 rounds remaining here in the top tier. Danerco has held off extremely well from Valentin over the last few laps, and it is going to be a 4th podium in 5 races from the Aston Martin driver. Keeps him in the championship hunt. Valentin crosses the line in 3rd, but it's going to be Asacombe who takes his first podium of the season. Valentin, Isma, Santervi rounded out the top 6. Walters might have a chance of stealing that place off Santervi. Indeed he does. He gets 5th and 6th, and so bit of a gain there for Williams over Aston Martin with that one. Cornet finishing in 8th place. Brock and Casper are going to be the final finishers. It looks like Casper's just going to miss out on the final points position there towards Yakita. Matthew Alder, though, what an impervious performance. That is worrying for everyone else. We said he looked like he was back to his best last week. There's no doubt about it now.
Yep, definitely no doubt about it. I think last week was just a taster of what was to come, really, wasn't it? That was unbelievably dominant for Matthew Alder. I think those drivers like Isma and Danerco that were maybe hoping that they'd got the better of Matthew Alder in the middle part of the season with the couple of mistakes he was making, that's completely flipped on its head, and really the power in this championship is back with Matthew Alder after a performance like that. He's going to think he's absolutely untouchable for the rest of the season. So with not long to go left, crucial point for Matthew Alder to be back at his absolute best. And Isma, the second that Matthew Alder is back at his best, Isma's just nowhere near challenging and is just making crucial mistakes, costing him more and more points, and that's going to put Isma really on the back foot now going into these latter stages. Yeah,
certainly. It is Matthew Alder then who takes another victory this season. That is number 5 for him. His first one, though, since the Austrian Grand Prix 5 rounds ago. Danerco makes it another second place. He keeps picking up those podiums. That could be crucial at the end of the season. Asakome in third. Valentine getting his best result of the season in fourth. Isma still picking up points. If it wasn't for a penalty, though, who knows? He might have even had a chance of picking up that fifth, fourth position. Walters in sixth. Santeri seventh. Corney in eighth. Brock and Yakita rounding out the final points positions. Casper missing out at the end by less than 3/10 of a second. Farby, we saw back off towards the end. H-Eagle and Fusilio were lapped. Max Wiesel and Jensen, the only retirements from that race from what was, we've said it a few times, it's a masterclass from Matthew.
Yeah, there's nothing really much else we can say really about that race, is there? It was just a masterclass for Matthew Alder, and just no one anywhere near touching him. Like you say, the only person that got close was Valentine at turn one, and had Valentine got that move done, could it have been a different race? I doubt it would have been. The pace advantage that Matthew Alder had, even with how difficult it was to overtake in that race in the intermediate conditions, I don't think that the drivers would have been able to hold Matthew Alder back even if he'd had a bad start. It was just cut and dry, miles above the rest of the field in that race, and completely dominant, and dominance that we don't see really on a level in league racing anymore because of how the games have run in previous years with the power of DRS and things like that, and how easy it is to follow other cars. You don't see performances like that often, so that really is something special for Matthew Alder, that race.
Yeah, definitely. It's like we said a few times, it's worrying for everyone else if that's the pace he's able to put on for the rest of the season. They are going to find themselves in a bit of a tricky situation. We're just going to get at what the calendar is, of course, for the rest of the season. This is PS tier only. There is a slight difference with the PC tier, with the Brazilian Grand Prix going to be rearranged for the break week. You can just see what the calendar is on the screen right there. Singapore next week. We all know how often it can rain around there.
Yeah, it can often rain around there, doesn't it? I think that the game maybe got the bug for a wet weather Singapore race in 2017, and it seems to have rained ever since the Formula One games in Singapore. But it's commonly very wet there, and it is commonly very wet as well for the two races after that in Cota in Italy. So wet weather could play a big part in the next three rounds, especially Bahrain. I'll be massively surprised if there's any wet weather interference in that race, but who knows? With the amount of wet weather interference we've had so far this season, I wouldn't be shocked if that does happen. But yeah, either way, 4 rounds to go and 3 really big opportunities of wet weather race, and if we do get another one, with how common it's happened so far this season and the odds we've had of it happening, if it does happen, surely Matthew Alder is hands down the favourite.
Yeah, definitely. If he carries on this way, I can't really see anyone getting close to him if he carries on this form. He has taken the lead of the championship. It was a 5-point disadvantage he had with that fastest lap today. I believe he's actually now 6 points ahead of Isma, and Daneco is still within range as well. I think he is still within a race victory of the top of the championship, so definitely don't count him out as we head into the final few races. We're going to head our way over towards the interview room now to start talking to our drivers, and we're going to start with the man who we didn't really see too much of after lap 1. He streaked away at the front of the field. Congratulations, Matthew. Probably one of the most dominant victories I've ever commentated on in the top tier.
Yeah, I knew as soon as I got pole, if I held it into turn 1, then I'd probably be able to drive away from everyone else, since my rain pace is better than everyone else's, especially this season. So yeah, I knew as long as I kept P1, I'd be able to just drive away, and I avoided penalties as well, which was good as well.
Yeah, certainly. How do you keep your focus in those conditions? I know a lot of times when there's battling going on, you've always got someone else to concentrate on, but at times in that situation, you were just on your own and still setting personal bests. Even, I think, personal best you set on something like lap 21 or lap 22 on the old set of tyres.
Yeah, I don't really know. Probably just, I actually quite like the rain, so that probably is why. Just able to keep driving and do good laps. I think most of my laps were faster than people's fastest laps in the last stint, so I just kept the consistency going.
Yeah, certainly. Consistent performance, and you've now had more wins than anyone else this season. I'll pass you over to Aidan for any questions he might have.
Yeah, I don't know how willing you're going to be to answer this question, but what's your secret when it comes to wet weather racing? Obviously, your pace difference is it's not even like a slight gain on the rest of the field. It is miles faster than the rest of the field at the moment. What is your secret in wet weather conditions?
I don't know. I've always been quite fast in the rain, all the way 2019, 2018, 2017. It's something I seem to have the ability to be able to do. Just drive in the rain very fast. I don't really have a secret. It's just it happens.
It just happens, yeah. That's one way around it, isn't it? That's absolutely brilliant. And then, obviously, you had a couple of rough rounds recently, but obviously Brazil are now here. You've had 2 very good races on the bounce. How much of that is a confidence boost for you going into the final 4 rounds of the season?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, having a gap obviously is preferable, but after the 2 races I had, definitely being in the lead still is great.
Yeah, definitely great, and a great bounce back from you in the last couple of rounds. Congratulations! What a brilliant result from you today.
Thanks.
Yeah, congratulations to Matthew, winner for the 5th time this season. We'll let him head off and bring in the man who finished second once again. He keeps picking up these podiums. It is Danerco. Great race from yourself in today. Valentin didn't make it easy for you. There was nothing you could do about Matthew's pace, though.
Yeah, I'm the opposite of Matthew. I'm really slow in the rain, so if you can teach me something, would be great. No, I just went for the undercut. I needed to pass Valentin in the first place because I was a bit faster, maybe. And then after a good battle in the sector 2, I made the position, and I just thought about an undercut, but it was too early, maybe, because I arrived at the end with 24%, I think. And I was really slow in the last laps. So I just managed a bit bad the undercut, but in the end it paid off. I finished P2. Matthew was not matchable, so all good.
Yeah, definitely. All good for you indeed. Were you worried at all towards the end of the race? We saw Valentin a couple of times get fairly close and believe you had a couple of warnings. Were you worried that he was going to try and send one up the inside, which might have given you damage or might have even given you a penalty?
I just defended the position because I didn't want him maybe to pass, and if he could have taken his penalty removed, then I was losing the place. So it was really difficult also because I had the first 2 warning in the first 4 or 5 laps, so I just I didn't have to take any more warnings in 30 laps, so it was difficult.
Yeah, did a great job though. More podiums still than anyone else this season in the top tier. Aidan, any questions for Danerco?
I think the only question maybe to cover is looking at the final 4 rounds of the season into the latter stages. Of course, you're still well within the championship fight. Which of the final 4 tracks do you think is your best opportunity at getting one of those race wins?
100% Imola, because yeah, it's really good and I'm fast on that. So I'm also going in a week. So
well, beautiful. There you go. That'll be brilliant. Definitely, and yeah, a man of good taste with Imola, I would definitely say. But congratulations on another podium this season.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks to Danerco and Matthew for joining us for the interviews. I don't believe we are going to get Ascombe, unfortunately, and we've already spoken a bit about some of the races that are going to be there towards the end of the season. You can see him on screen, 25th of April, Singapore, next time around. The closest thing we get in Formula 1, Aidan, to an endurance race. Do not be surprised, especially if it rains or we get safety cars, if the race itself hits over that 1 hour mark.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be surprised, and often the case is with Singapore that it is a race of attrition, isn't it? There's so many elements to the Singapore race. It's obviously, like you say, the longest race on the calendar in terms of time. There's a lot of corners. It's a really demanding circuit. There's no room for error, and there's all these different strategy elements as well. So, yeah, I would be surprised if we get through that race without a safety car, and I'd be surprised if we get through that race without some sort of attrition playing a part in that one. So, yeah, really looking forward to Singapore. It's going to be another new challenge this season.
Yeah, I think it always provides interesting races with the different strategies drivers can go for. It knackers for drivers out, I think, Singapore heat, and it definitely isn't too good for the Pirelli tyres either. The first time you'll be able to see Singapore, and I'm sure you'll all be delighted to hear this, we're back with proper PCF1 action, not just a social race. The championship is going to be back this week with the Singapore Grand Prix on Wednesday with Ginger Andy and Danfield, so make sure to check that one out. Rest of the PC tiers will be there on the Thursday. You'll see PlayStation action on Sunday, and myself and Aiden on the Monday, of course. Thank you for Aiden for joining me in the commentary box. Thanks to all the drivers as well. Thanks also to our sponsors, Grid Rival. You can see them up there on the screen. Make sure to check them out with that link, which is also down in the description. And thanks also to everyone for watching as well. And we will see you in a week's time for the Singapore Grand Prix. Matthew Alder has retaken the lead of the championship with 4 races to go. Can Isma find his way back up on top? Or can Daneko leave it late and maybe take the lead heading into the final few races? Take care of yourselves, everyone, and we will see you in a week's time. Goodbye.